Hello and welcome at long last to a new episode of my Kerbal Space Program NASA series. Kind of hit a derailment there with final season, but with those knocked out of the way, you can get a little more playtime in, make a couple more videos. We're kicking things off with yet another shuttle launch. With the Eve transfer window approaching, I've decided I need to beef up my communications network. Really don't have much in orbit that can reach out to Eve. I don't want to repurpose my Duna satellite, because knowing me, I'd probably just forget, and when I make the transfer for my Pathfinder mission, that could go very much badly wrong. Not the prettiest climb. Had to take a break from Kerbal Space Program for a while, so I was a little rusty in getting this thing into orbit, but didn't really matter too much. The payload was a lot heavier than I was expecting it to be. I didn't quite look at its mass. I just kind of shoved it into the shuttle. Not that it really matters. We're only going up to about 80 kilometers, so not the highest orbit we're going to be putting into. The satellite itself has a payload assist module, which is just an engine and a fuel tank that can be jettisoned to get it into what I was hoping would be a geosync orbit, but that didn't quite work out how I was hoping it would, so I had to improvise. Nice tank separation here. I eventually had to switch back to this thing because at 30,000 with 27 kilometer periaps, if it's not being in physics range or directly watched, it'll just kind of orbit forever. But this is my rather large satellite with a long range dish on it. Not too shabby looking. Put a ton of batteries in it inside the Universal Storage Science Bays. And this was rare. I've actually tried to make this happen before and it hasn't, and just on this flight I got lucky. You could actually see the tank move by from the cockpit. I'm 99.9% certain no NASA shuttle ever actually got to see this, because that's actually kind of dangerous to have that thing shooting out like that. Get this thing circularized. I just wanted to go into low carbon orbit, didn't really want to run all the problems. I still left those duration extension tanks on board, which was kind of idiotic, but what you gonna do? Before we can deploy this thing, we gotta set the omnidirectional antenna to read. Otherwise, being launched from a manned mission is advantageous, because if I'd forgotten to do that, I could just go ahead and have a Kerbal unfold it. Separation goes smoothly. And this is where I run into an issue. Go ahead and fire up my engine, and crossfeed enabler strikes again. It was draining. Actually, I don't think it was crossfeed enabler. I do believe, because I didn't lock it and I had TAC fuel balancer going. I just told it to transfer into that forward tank, and without locking this one, it just drained it. So now that I think of it, this is operator error. It has nothing to do with crossfeed enabler. So at this stage, kind of have to improvise. It's got a ton of RCS fuel on it, which I was really planning to use for the majority of its maneuvering anyway, because I can make little finer adjustments to my orbital period. So I basically held H for a long time. You can see that mission timer in there. This thing's been up there for... It took me an hour and 32 minutes to get this thing circularized. A lot of that was spent with a guitar pick wedged underneath the keys to keep H held down. And this is the fruits of my labor and making adjustments for the rover design based on feedback we've gotten from the moon. I'm probably not going to leave that crane on board. I just thought it'd be kind of neat. It really doesn't have much in the way of lifting capacity. It kind of torques the whole rover over. Torques the rover over. It makes it fall if I try to pick up something too heavy, and it doesn't have any range of motion to the side, so just thought it was a neat little piece of kit. Probably not going to make the final cut unless I drastically redesign it. but that's going to raise a whole other host of issues that really don't know how much I want to deal with. See, redesigned passenger rover. I'm not going to use my original cargo rover design after finding out how unstable the passenger rover was. But you can see I've got the oxygen converter down there, and that being a heavy unit, it really dropped my center of mass much lower. So it's a lot harder to tip this thing over than the previous model. Nice view of the crane working from inside the cockpit. But I do have front and rear wheels set to action groups 1 and 2, so I can disengage those at will. I only have the center wheels working on the brakes, so it'll keep from trying to tip over as it brakes. Decided to test out Vessel Viewer on it, just see what it looks like rolling around. Do a nice little status display. And it's pretty dang fast. That's 25 meters a second. If back in the napkin calculation, well, back in my mental napkin, I guess, probably what, maybe 50 miles an hour? I'm probably overestimating that a bit. It'll still tip over, but it's not nearly as dangerous as my previous model was, because the center of mass is actually below those life support tanks, which was kind of cool. Makes it a lot stabler, just a lot easier to live with. Got winches on the side like I had planned to, so if it tips over it can right itself without having to call for backup. Actually quite pleased with how this turned out. Once again, testing range at night with the lights on to see how far we can get just with maximum power drain. And in that little universal storage container on the back, I'm going to stuff a ground pylon in there and probably just one of those single solar panels, just in case we could get into a really sticky situation and it's somehow gotten itself outside rover range for its partner to come save it. They can just kind of slap a panel on there. You can see just how unstable it was coming down there. It was rocking all over, but never really threatening to roll. Which, lowering center of gravity is the #1 thing you can do to improve your rovers in Kerbal Space Program. Couple days later, we go back to Space Shuttle Intrepid on its return voyage after spending a day in space, I believe. Another thing that's kind of nice about deploying satellites from the shuttle is you can just kind of leave it up there for a while and bring it back at your leisure. Which, if I brought it back right after the satellite circularized, I'd be trying to make a night landing. And the instrument flight system does make that a lot easier, but my very first flight after a long hiatus from the game, I really wasn't chomping at the bit to give that a go. So I just waited till Kerbal Space Program Center came back around into daylight. Still need to work on my glide slope because I'm touching down way too far down the runway. Even with the braking parachute, it's further than I want and it's just sloppy. I've got some great tips on setting up my joystick, so I'm probably going to give that one more go. The problem is roll is so much more sensitive on my joystick than I'd like it to be. So pitch is fine, but I don't want to adjust the amount of force I get out of my ailerons because I need maximum deflection to get the pitch I need. So it'll be a little more fiddling around, but I'm going to give it another shot. Head back up to the base and start. I had to reload from a quick save, and so that's maybe what caused these solar panel issues. I didn't have a crash, it wouldn't load my persistent file, but that's fine. I always quick save before I shut the game down anyway, so I always have a quick save to rename persistent, which once again it wiped everybody's Final Frontier ribbons. That's kind of the last straw. That mod is going to go because I love it, but I can't really make much use of it in the current state. So making preparations to carry some fuel out to the sky crane so we can get it closer to the base, get it properly refueled. You see how delicate I'm having to be to get this thing to turn around. It's just kind of not really, well, just kind of not good. It's the best way to put it. I still think it looks great. That higher center of gravity trying to tip it over, but thankfully in Munar gravity, I've got some time. I can pull an Evel Knievel. If it starts to tip right, I can kind of turn into the roll and rock it back onto its wheels. Show off the cockpit just a little more than I have in the past. I just absolutely love this cockpit for rovers. Gonna go ahead and move Jofkin into the second seat of the cockpit because I haven't actually shown that view yet. And it does make sense physically that passenger cab goes straight up to the cockpit, so I can just imagine there's a little passageway to get up there. And this was just setting the cruise control, like I said, using trim settings to get a very slow 2 to 3 meters a second forward velocity. It took me a while to get out to the sky crane, but I tend to try to follow real-life rover protocol, which is slow and steady will actually get you where you're trying to go instead of rolling over in death and destruction. Thought I'd take a moment to show off some of the cooler features that are in the new cockpits as of B9 5.0, which I'm a full 2 releases down now. The game has hit beta officially, and I'm still tooling around in 2.4.2, but there's no way for me to get this thing ported over to 0.25 like I was wanting to, and it's gonna be a while yet before I get back into beta. I might do a couple videos just playing around with it, but this series is going to be confined to the current version. Which, what I mentioned in a previous video, Sarbian has come to the rescue for the Space Shuttle Engines mod. He's got a lot on his plate. I really don't know how he does it, but that's exciting. I bring that up because I don't know when he's going to get around to being able to update it, but the fact that he's putting the effort in is he's moved quite a ways up my personal hero list. Going to go ahead and run the connector out. And if you plug it in docked mode, that's how you go ahead and you can do resource transfer and all that fun stuff. Once again, fixing collapsed solar panels. Don't have a whole lot in the way of fuel and oxidizer to transfer, but it's better than nothing. And without a payload, this thing's, as I've mentioned many times before, has plenty of delta V. I'm going to run back to the rover and wind the winch back in. And 4 times time acceleration. It's a lot less tedious. But just going to go ahead and go for it and bring this thing back to the base. Or get it as close as we can. It took a couple hops. I edited those out just because it's kind of painful to watch. I still was too far out trying to bring him over to see how close I could get. So go ahead and switch back, and very gingerly, because I didn't want to cook him with the engine, just set it well within range so we can get a pipe linked up and refuel this thing properly. That's probably my biggest problem, is once I get something down, trying to make a minute, like, little hop is very difficult for me. So, and having emerged from the Munar night, we go ahead and turn the lights back on. Terrible lighting system where it's only actually useful during the day, but the sun is low enough on the horizon that these Munar mornings go on for pretty long, so it's not too terrible. Make a slow lumbering turn back. On the way back, I hit a whole 4.6 meters a second. Truly hot rodding in space. We're going to go ahead and plug this into the base so it can recharge its batteries. And that's one of the reasons why I was so particular about putting docking ports and radio connector ports and pipe endpoints all over this place, because I didn't quite have an idea of how the final configuration was going to be of the base. So this kind of lets just anywhere I have to bring the rover to park, there will be a power plug to plug into. I'm going to go ahead and power it down and pick up the last remnants of what was supposed to be a solar panel array. I will build another one eventually, because I said previously that power generation isn't an issue. With all this stuff plugged in, I have more than enough to do a full fuel generation cycle, but just a little extra wouldn't be... I'm still losing power. It's not... My electric charge is still draining, is the best way to put that. So I'm going to have to get around that just for my own amusement, I guess. Start the long, boring process of generating new fuel and oxidizer. That thing gets a good bite into the Munar surface, starts extracting kethane and simultaneously converting it to fuel. They keep calling it jet fuel, but, you know, liquid fuel. It was a little confusing for me the first time I fired that up, but I quickly figured out what was going on. And since we're in the middle of a fuel production cycle, I figured I'd finally do something I said I was going to do for a while now. We're going to have a liberal application of space tape to link these two struts together, or trusses. As this continues, I'm putting a lot of time into this Munar base. There's some things I need to get around to. Really need to get back to space station construction, and I didn't catch it on tape I didn't catch it. I didn't record it, but I did accidentally switch to my space telescope. That's the word. And yeah, the aperture was open and facing the sun, so the second I switched to it, the control unit exploded. So I'm going to have to fly a servicing mission up to replace that. And as I said previously, given the shortfalls of my previous rover design, we're not going to bring the original cargo rover design up. And this is what is actually going to the moon, and a variant of it with very minor modifications is going to be going to Duna. This thing is loaded for bear in the scientific sense. I have pretty much every experiment on board that I can run from the ground on it. Obviously the radio plasma wave sensor antenna doesn't work on the ground. The solar particle collector doesn't work on the ground. So we've omitted those. But we've got universal storage, mystery goo, magnetometer, barometer, and temperature sensor. All sorts of fun stuff on this thing. Just do a quick demonstration of what this bad boy is capable of. It's got, and it's not so much a cargo vehicle anymore. This is an expeditionary vehicle, as I'm calling it. I've got these work lights independent of the main vehicle lighting, so they're not trying to shine through that cargo bay as if we end up driving at night. Huge batteries on board. Obviously got the ever important side recovery winches. But with any vehicle, it needs to be stress tested before it can be successfully deployed. And this is the fruits of my labor in setting only the middle row with brakes. A panic stop will not flip it over, which is pretty critical. Have our laser ablation imager and a deep core sample drill. Yeah, it was only recently dawned on me that The rover designs I previously had really weren't kitted out much in the way of for science, and if I'm going to take the trouble of driving out to a whole new biome, I really want to have some experiments on board I can run. But this is the next thing going to the moon, and I fully intend this to be the next launch. I'm kind of running out of time here, so... But this is what we're going to be looking forward to as the next launch. And after that, I'm going to deploy a lab module, and this thing is going to set out for some new unexplored biomes on the moon to get their final shakedown tests, all bravely paving the way for a future Constellation-style Duna mission. If that sounds even remotely interesting, stay tuned, but at this particular moment, thank you for watching.